everyone. It's Ryan Fowler with my good friend Jordan Kurtz here. Inner Game Group every Saturday. We have a good one today. We're on our third part of the Anna Lembke Stanford psychiatrist interview with Diary of CEO Mike Bartlett. And we're going to talk about victim mentality today. Denise D., good morning to you. And thanks for being on the show. So Tim is on vacation today. I was talking to him. He's on a beach somewhere in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So he's having fun. But we're here. I assume he'll be back next week. And today, victim mentality is absolutely rampant in our society. It's causing massive problems. And it causes the most problems for the person with victim mentality. And in this interview, Dr. Lembke, she mentions briefly toxic shame and resentment. We're going to dive way deeper into that than what she talks about. But she talks about narrative, all sorts of things. And yeah, the root of it all is childhood trauma, subconscious trauma. So we're going to look at her discussion and the dynamics of victim mentality, how toxic shame play a role, how resentment plays a role, how it all works together, and then how do you overcome it? Because if you're in victim mentality, that means you have to stay powerless to get the benefits of victim mentality. And it's a net negative, but those like addiction's a net negative, right? But there's benefit that keeps people in the addiction. It's smaller short-term return that helps you manage pain at the expense of greater long-term net loss. So we're going to dive into that. It'll be very interesting. And if you have victim mentality, I hope you are able to listen to this. I think it'll be very helpful. Those who don't, it's so rampant in our society, and maybe have victim mentality in some things and don't acknowledge it or not aware of it, but it's so rampant in our society. It's important to understand what people with victim mentality are going through so we can maybe manage them better. So before we dive into that, Jordan, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself, my man.
Hello. Jordan Kurtz, hypnosis here. I'm a hypnotist. I help you find and locate all of your limiting beliefs so that you can remove them. You can chase whatever matters most to you. And on the victim mentality portion, I think that I'll just comment briefly. I think generally, if you believe you're not worthy to get what you want, that you'll generally be predisposed to think of yourself already as a victim. But you're a victim of yourself. And so if that's one of the beliefs you have, then come work with one of us and we can remove that belief entirely so that your own subconscious doesn't hold you back. You don't have to fight yourself. You can align your subconscious beliefs with what you actually want to accomplish in life rather than fighting them the whole time. So.
All right. Yeah, victim mentality is all about powerlessness, and we are all about empowering people through both subconscious rewiring, but also, we do a fair amount of life coaching with different cognitive methods, but we're about getting you the power. And the truth is, and it looks like everyone's filing in now. Thank you, loyal followers. Mike Carton, welcome to the show. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
And Zora Mina, good morning to you as well. So, victim mentality, you have to stay powerless. And some people just believe they're powerless, but that's not true. That's part of the narrative. We're going to dive into all of that. We're about empowering people. The truth is, many people with victim mentality were victimized at some point, but then they got in their head that they're forever powerless, or maybe they willingly stay in victim mentality in order to get outside validation, get people to feel sorry for them, get some sort of attention or another, get some help sometimes. The problem with that, of course, is you have to stay a victim to keep getting that benefit. And it is, in the long run, far better just to claim your power, to understand that, yes, bad and even horrible things happen to people in life, but that the overwhelming majority of people, I'm not going to say everyone, because if you're a vegetable in a hospital bed, there's nothing you can do there, but pretty much anyone else has more power than they know, can claim your power, and can kick all sorts of ass in life, regardless of what happens to you. So let's go ahead. If you can cue the clip up, Jordan. And let's go ahead and dive in.
All right.
It's a society where we think every feeling we have, we think everything that makes us different is a deficiency.
Jordan, is this at 121.35?
Start.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I think so. Yeah.
Let me answer this by talking a little bit about the role of language and narrative, because I think this is very fascinating. And, as a psychiatrist and a therapist, that is my bread and butter, right? Is narrative, how people tell their stories. Mm-hmm. By giving language to our experience, we gain awareness of our conceptual models of the world. Okay.
And just pause real quick, Jordan. So just so you guys put it into, our language, narrative is subconscious belief systems. And what she's talking about now is everyone has subconscious belief systems, whether you're aware of them or not. So the first step is become aware of your subconscious framework, your belief system about the world around you and what you believe about yourself, others, the world around you, different things in the world, your identity, all of that. So she's talking about that. We'll keep going.
What I have learned over time is that the way people tell their stories is a window into their model of the world, and that there are healthy narratives and not so healthy narratives. And in general, in my clinical experience, when people come into the room and they tell their life story in such a way that they're always the victim of other people and circumstance in the world, those are people who are, number one, not doing well, and number two, not going to do well going forward unless they change that narrative to acknowledge what they've contributed to the problem. And the reason for that is because the way that we narrate our lives is not just a way to understand our past. It actually is our roadmap for the future. So if I see myself as a victim and that's my narrative, I will literally create victimhood for myself going forward. I will literally change my sensed experience so that whatever happens, I'll make sure I end up as a victim. When people with severe addiction
go ahead and
get
pause
into
right
recovery,
there.
one of the
So this is core identity, what she's talking about right now. And what's important to understand is we can find out what our subconscious belief systems are. It's actually, I won't say it's easy to find out all of what's in our subconscious. I don't know all what's in my subconscious. I know a lot of it. But our core identity, just the main major things, with certain exercises and a little practice, you can figure it out. Our subconscious communicates to us, our intuition, our emotion, the message, the narrative attached to our emotions. We can figure it out. And she's talking about core identity, being a victim. But I think it's very interesting. And this is echoed through other shows we've done, through other scientific research. What we believe about ourselves is the number one thing that shapes the future we're going to have. So if you believe you are a victim, that is going to keep you a victim and in that mentality throughout your life, that core identity belief. You can go to normal therapy and use your cognitive brain and slowly rewire that over time to some degree. But if there's a lot of subconscious trauma tied to it, you may find it's very hard until that trauma is removed. And usually there is, honestly. There's pretty much always trauma with victim mentality. But do you have anything to add, Jordan?
I was actually thinking the reverse of victim mentality. Well, this is actually, I like what she said by you watch how people talk about themselves and they give away their subconscious beliefs. I've been talking about that for a while, that there's very few people I interact with now, and I'm sure you're probably the same way, where you can't really get a fairly accurate reading about where their self-esteem is at based on how they talk about themselves and their body language and
Reading their vibe, body language, tone of voice. Yeah.
right. And she calls it narrative. We call it, we use that subconscious beliefs term. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's also kind of a very disempowering belief to think of yourself as a victim. But it's like almost two sides of the same coin, where I think people actually slightly feel, and let me know what you think about this, but calling yourself a victim, I think there's a disempowering and empowering feeling about it, meaning it's not my fault, meaning it's not I don't have to change
Oh yeah,
anything.
she's going to talk about it in just a moment, and we're going to go into toxic shame and resentment, but you're on the right track for sure.
Yes. Meaning, because it takes away some responsibility. If I'm the victim, then I don't have to change.
I don't have to be
anything.
responsible. And
that can be a freeing feeling. And I suppose sometimes that is true. But almost like being a victim can be another form of addiction in a way, where it's just when life just gets hard, automatically your default is shifting responsibility away. Then
I'm powerless, therefore I don't have to worry about doing anything about this. I don't have to do any work.
Right.
I can just stay where I am and blame everyone else and not accept responsibility. And now it's easy and comfortable, although miserable.
Yeah.
As well.
And I can also see on the flip side, where you take responsibility for other people too much, so that they become in a position where they can start, like, you can take responsibility for yourself, but if you start taking responsibility for others, that then use that attachment you have to them to manipulate you, to shame you, to guilt you, to maybe use you monetarily. I can also see this.
That's codependency.
Right.
The exception, of course, is parents in relation to their children. Yeah, parents should be responsible for their children at young ages.
Right.
Other than that, yeah, exactly.
Right. But certainly adults in relationships.
Yeah. 100%.
Right.
And I'll just point one thing out. She said, if you identify as a victim, if that's your narrative, it will keep you in victimhood.
Yeah.
And there was an experiment. There's two things I want to point out. There was this experiment done. It's a famous experiment. I mean, you can Google it. It should come right up after I describe it. I'm not sure what the search terms are, but it should be easy to figure out. There was this experiment done where they took attractive people, and then they put up all this makeup to make them look disfigured and unattractive. And then they had the people go to a car dealership, and I think it was a car dealership, try and buy a car, or maybe they just went out in the world. And they, after putting on this makeup and, scarring, like really high-end makeup, really very realistic, they had the people look in the mirror so that they can see that they were disfigured and now looked horrible. And then right before the people went out to go into the world and do what they were doing and then report back, they said, okay, we're going to do just a final little touch up on your makeup. And they removed all the makeup, so the person went out as an attractive person, their normal state. And then they asked the people to report their experience, how others treated them in the world. And the people responded that, yeah, I was discriminated against, and I was treated poorly here and treated poorly there. But the people didn't understand that they went out as attractive people, not unattractive people. They were tricked. And so that whole frame of reference, I'm an unattractive person now, I'm disfigured, etc., led them to believe there was discrimination there when there wasn't, because they weren't these unattractive, disfigured people. They just were led to believe that they were.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me, Jordan? Hello? Did I lose you, Jordan? Okay, Jordan's frozen, so I'll keep going. And Jordan, if you can hear me, go ahead and cue up the clip again. But if not, so our identity is very important. Now, there is a second thing before we go on I want to point out is there was another. Yeah, you dropped, but you're back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, I hear you now.
There was another interview. Did you hear about all of that experiment I just described?
Yes, I did. I had comments on that too.
Now,
but go ahead.
Here's another thing. There was a clip, Diary of a CEO clip, interviewing Dr. K, his YouTube channel, Healthy Gamer GG. Very interesting guy. He was a monk for 7 years. I think it was Tibetan monk. I'm not sure, but a monk for 7 years, and then went to Harvard and became a psychiatrist. And there's a clip I play to my clients all the time. And that clip is what he says in the clip is, if you believe you are a loser, the empathic circuits of other people pick up on that. And that is, our subconscious picks up on what they feel inside and gives us a vibe about that person. And then the person who believes they are a loser are treated like a loser by everyone else. And that applies to victim mentality too. So if you believe you're a victim, if you believe you're powerless, other people's subconscious mind picks up on that and treats you accordingly. And you're actually going to have a much worse life experience with this mindset, and people will actually treat you worse if you believe that you're a victim, you're powerless, you're low value, loser, whatever it is. People pick up on it and treat you accordingly, and they will treat you worse. And you will also perceive that you are being treated worse than you actually are. It's a double whammy. So victim mentality is no good, man. It screws stuff up. Yeah. So anyways, any comments or just...
Yeah, which is wild because, I can think of, how many political movements we know of that are designed specifically around telling people that they're victims.
Yeah.
It seems to be
it's a horrible ideology.
Yeah, it's an effective tool to mobilize people, but it's just wildly unhealthy. And the difference is, because sometimes I think it's accurate, but it's also not. It depends on if the central focus of your message is you're a victim versus you should be empowered. I think there's a very big difference between that, because there are real victims in the world. There are very much there are people that get discriminated against. Absolutely, that exists. But if I think it's very telling when the central message that you say is not of empowerment, because that's the way you pull people out of victim mentality is not tell them constantly that they're victims, but is you encourage them to be empowered, to take responsibility for their life, to try and move up in the world. And especially when you're manufacturing the idea that someone is a victim rather than them actually being a victim. And so it's and I think it particularly works well on people that already have the tendency to believe that they might not be good enough themselves. And so, if I'm a cunning, if I run an organization and I'm cunning enough and I want to attract people if I want to attract more people to support me, well, I say the things that align with their subconscious beliefs, and then, they support me. And so it's not, victim, it bleeds across every aspect of life. It's not just individually, just how much success am I having or not having? How much am I struggling? It's like, this is weaponized against people. And the best defense, I think, is, raising your self-esteem so you don't think yourself as a victim, and just thinking for yourself, thinking critically. If you know,
So much of our happiness and success, I mean, really, most of it is determined not by what happens to us, but rather our outlook on the world. And I did find this Dr. K clip I was telling you about earlier. So let me go ahead and play this, because this really ties into what we're talking about here and why victim mindset is really destructive to the victim more than anyone else.
But the single most important thing that will determine your future is your sense of who you are. And that's not like some, spiritual, get connected with you. This is like fucking science, right? If you believe.
Massive amount of research has been done on this. That's why he's saying it's science. This is all confirmed by, top level university scientific research.
If you are a loser, the empathic circuits of other people's brains will detect that in you, and they will treat you like a loser. You carry who you are with you. That's why you get into failed relationship number 1, failed relationship number 2, failed relationship number 3, until you changed. And when you change, your sense of identity changes, then your future will change.
And that's the problem with victim mentality. I had a guy that I did a session for, and before I did like 2 sessions, and after the sessions, I followed up with him maybe 5 months, 6 months later. It might have actually been a year later. And he said, before our sessions, he was an engineer in charge of 8, 9 other engineers, engineer team lead. So he was their boss. He said, I would tell the other engineers what to do, and they would ignore me, and they disrespect him in all these low-level ways, indirect ways. And he says, now, not only do they do what I tell them to or ask them to, but they actually come to me for advice and guidance. And the only thing that shifted was we got him to believe in his ability and value. So now, through hypnosis, we got him to believe, wow, I do have value. I'm a smart guy. I'm a good guy. The end of every show, I always say, every single show, you have more power than you know. Because once you believe that, you have it. It doesn't mean your situation changes immediately, but your situation can change pretty rapidly. And over time, your situation absolutely will change. I found these methods 12 years ago, and I've been learning more and refining and adding to for the last 12 years. But within 3 years of learning these methods, my income went up 2.5 times, and it stayed higher for, many, many years. So, and in fact, it even went higher still. At one point, I quadrupled it. So you change your internal world, and the external world then matches it in one way or another. It doesn't mean, I could cross the street today and get hit by a bus. There are some stuff in the outside world that happen that are outside of our control. But when you get a good internal belief, people treat you better, doors open, you claim your power, you work harder, you do what you need to do, learn what you need to learn, get the skills, get the power, and then you have a great life. But victim mentality absolutely interferes with every single aspect of what I just said. And people will treat you worse because at some level, victim mentality people feel like losers at some level. They have toxic shame in them. Dr. Lembke is going to go into that. But let's go ahead and cue up the other Dr. Lembke clip, and we'll keep going. Thanks, Jordan.
All right.
The most palpable changes that I see is the way that they narrate their lives. They go from, in addiction, talking about their lives as if it's always everybody else's fault, to in recovery, talking about their lives in a way that says, oh, you know what? I could have done better here. Or, you know what? That's something that I keep doing that really messes with my life that I want to change, and I'm going to figure out how to change that.
Why is it so hard to take responsibility in such a way?
Great question. We just hate to do it. Because when we do it, we feel shame, and shame is an incredibly painful emotion. It's like a gut punch of an emotion that is associated with fear of abandonment, fear of being shunned by our tribe. We'd much rather paper that shame over with anger and resentment toward others.
It's interesting because
Okay, that's very, very important. Pause right there. Do you have any comments? Or you just want me to dive into it? That's like super important. It ties into what we do. But go ahead.
I mean, yeah, that's that's what I was saying earlier. So go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, everything you said is correct, Jordan. When you have a toxic shame that she's talking about, feeling not good enough or inadequate or bad or unworthy or useless or worthless in some way, it's different for different people, falling short, whatever, stupid, lazy, ugly, whatever. Any sort of that feeling that you're deficient somehow, flawed somehow, not good enough somehow, that is toxic shame. The core, the root cause of that is childhood trauma. And it's so painful that instead of facing your demons, claiming responsibility, people will stay in victimhood so that they don't have to face that. And instead, they blame the outside world. They're like, I'm in a terrible position in life. My life sucks. I can blame myself or I can blame others. When you blame others, you're in victim mentality right there. And people, and now you're angry at the world. You're resenting the world. By the way, the red pill does this to some degree. Oh, women are horrible. Oh, you know, and a lot of what they say is true. Listen, a lot of trauma that victim mentality, at some point they were traumatized. At some point they were victims, but they choose to stay in victimhood because they don't want to face the shame that is attached to that childhood trauma. They'd rather blame the world than go inside and find out where they were accountable. But also, toxic shame just comes from childhood trauma. Even if something's not your fault, oftentimes as children, we blame ourselves. So what we do is we get all the shame out of you. Having shame is optional. Having shame is optional. If you know what to do, you can get it out of your subconscious, and then you don't need to resent others or blame others. You don't need to be a victim in order to cover up that shame, because we get it out of you. We put all the good self-belief in you, and then people just take off. And we do it all the time. We've done it several hundred times for several hundred people at this point, maybe approaching 1,000. If you look at Jordan and me together, probably 1,000 plus. I'm not sure. Get rid of that shame, because that really is at the root of victim mentality. It's also at the root of addiction. It's at the root of many things. So anything else to add, Jordan, or we just keep going?
Yeah, move towards pain, avoid, move away from pain, move towards pleasure.
Cure the pain, cure the toxic shame. It's literally curable.
Right. I was referring to, he asked, well, why do people do this? Why do people have this victim mentality? It's because it's painful. I mean, it's painful
because people don't want to face their shame.
Right. I mean, it's certainly not comfortable to think of yourself as a victim, but it's more uncomfortable to
be a loser. Oh, I'm a piece of trash. That hurts worse than being a victim.
Right.
And now someone else is at fault, whoever the perpetrator is.
Right.
And resentment covers shame. Anger and resentment. When people come to me for a session, the very first thing I fix is all the resentment towards their mom, their dad, whoever abused them, whoever missed a childhood bully, the world, maybe a class of people, the government's keeping me down, And there is a lot of unfairness and real trauma and real harm done to people in life. But just don't stay stuck in that. You have the power to overcome. So get rid of that resentment, then get rid of the shame.
Yeah.
And now you're free. Now you're no longer a victim, because you don't need that victimhood anymore.
Yeah. Ever so often I find a case where somebody has so much resentment they won't let go of, because and sometimes they have to do the inverse, but most of the time it's that direction. I'd say.
Yeah.
At least
I agree. Sometimes you have to clear the shame first, and then they let go of the resentment because they're holding on to resentment because of the shame. But usually you fix the shame. For me, in my experience, I usually fix the resentment first so that then they can let go of the shame. But occasionally the reverse is true. That's right. I agree, Jordan.
Yeah. And so he was talking about, why do you feel this? And so it's, and because you're trying to just the point is you're trying to override one less negative feeling for another. And so if you can hide the fact that if you can hide the fact that you feel like a loser by feeling like a victim instead, then that gives you
that's less painful.
Right. You can it's not about me. I can let it go, which is,
I'm a victim, but it's not my fault. It's everyone else's fault.
Right. Which is actually kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, is almost similar to what we do in hypnosis, where we allow the inner child or themselves to let go of this responsibility they were carrying. Maybe they were victimized by their mother or father or whoever else. And we allow them to let that pain go. And it's actually but it's more of a negative version of what we're doing.
We usually don't let them let go of responsibility. Occasionally people feel responsible for things that are not their fault. Occasionally, but it's more just about empowering them and getting rid of all that shame, getting rid of all the resentment, getting them to believe that they can overcome. They do have more power than they know. Yeah.
The example I'm thinking about with responsibility is, a child or a client I worked with. They were particularly, what's the right word? They took a lot of responsibility for their parents' divorce. They were trying to heal that.
Children tend to blame themselves for stuff that's not their fault. That's true.
Right. And so
that's where the toxic shame comes in. It's like, oh, I couldn't hold my parents together because I'm not lovable or just whatever,
Or or like the inverse, where if I was more lovable or more sociable or more this or that,
and people would like me more.
Then it would have been held together. It's my fault that I didn't communicate with my parents better, as a 10-year-old or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's not to make fun of that. I mean, but that's how, that's one of the tools we can use at hypnosis is helping them let go of that shame they felt of, oh, I wasn't good enough because I couldn't hold my parents together, or my siblings were always fighting with one parent was always fighting with my sibling and I couldn't protect my sibling, or something like, or any of those inner family dynamics where the child feels responsible for something that really the child should not be responsible for.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree. Okay, so we'll keep going.
All right.
I wish he would have talked more about shame and resentment, though, because that is at the core of why people are victims. They don't want to feel ashamed. And she just said it. I wish he would have expounded more, because that's the heart of the issue right there. But we'll keep going.
Groups of people listening to this now, there'll be the high responsibility group that just love and revel in taking responsibility because they think taking responsibility means that they are strong. It means that I'm so strong, I can take the blame and withstand it. And it's funny because the more I've learned to take responsibility for things in certain areas of my life, the more I've become proud of myself and the more I think I'm strong. And I'm like, oh, look at me, I can take responsibility for anything. And then if you go down this spectrum, you'll eventually get to the end of the spectrum where you've got people who, even as they heard you say that, will feel cognitive dissonance. They'll feel a sense, like a little, it'll irritate them. It'll piss them off. And they will be the whataboutery gang. They'll be saying, yeah.
I'd say that would be being triggered by your subconscious programs.
Mm-hmm.
But what about Dave? He did this to me. And, they'll like the immediate reaction would be, they're pissed off. They've probably gone now. They've gone. So we're not even talking to them anymore. But if you but it's fine. We can talk about them. They're no longer here.
Right. There you go.
But that group of people, my question really is, how do you speak to that group of people and convince them that actually taking personal responsibility is a good thing for them? And if they're focused on what their core values or their North Star is in their life, then personal responsibility is the path there, not blame, not victimhood. Like, how do you turn those people around?
Great question. And I have to say, what I know about this, I learned from Alcoholics Anonymous and what they do, because they do something that's really incredible. First of all, it's necessary to validate somebody's victimhood. So this is to say you have been wrong. If they really have been wronged, to validate that, or you experienced this trauma, or you were born into this crappy situation and you were just a kid and you had no choice about that, and to really acknowledge that. But then the fourth step of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about looking at each of those situations, and after writing down, like, this person wronged me and exactly what they did. So, taking time to focus on the resentment, right? Then only after that to say, okay, but is there anything that I did that contributed to that problem? Is there anything at all that I could have done differently? And for a little kid, born into a horrific situation, there's not much, right? That a kid could have, we don't expect a child to take responsibility, but the adult who was that child, who continues to perpetuate some of the harms they experienced on other people, now we're talking. Now you can begin to take responsibility for your actions in the world. So I think starting with validating, the trauma or the victimhood or the way in which we were wronged, processing it, so giving it airtime, right? But not stopping there, which is by the way, often, in therapy, certain types of therapy, that's often where we stop. We don't then take it that very important next step and say, but, let's go and look at that again. And like, is there anything at all that you're contributing to this problem? Maybe it's just that you continue to ruminate about it, right? That like you're ruminating on your resentments is in a way your happy place. And maybe that's what you need to stop doing.
So that form of
Okay,
sort of
stop right
psychotherapy
there.
that stops there.
The other side of responsibility, if you take on the right responsibilities, the other side is benefit and power. You have the power to do it, and you're doing it because there's benefit. So I think there's some responsibilities people take on that don't benefit them, in which case they should not take on those responsibilities. But just like Steve was saying, he takes on all this responsibility and he's proud because it shows how much power he has. But also, what Dr. Anna Lembke just said completely exposes the massive flaws in the woke agenda. And honestly, what has kind of overtaken, the whole Democratic Party is this victim mindset, and everyone's so horrible and blah, blah, blah. And they're really appealing to people who want to take the easy path, who don't want to claim their responsibility, who don't want to face the fact that they have power to overcome. And that's the thing that's the lie of the victim mindset is you're a victim because you don't have power to overcome. But you absolutely do. Hey, let's face it, racism's real. Racism happens. But if you're like, well, because, I'm a minority group, or, and I was victimized and this stuff happened, which maybe it did. And then the narrative is, well, so that's why I can't get ahead. I call bullshit. I call bullshit each and every time, because when people wrong you, even if it's a major setback, unless it's something like, okay, now you are, a vegetable in a hospital bed and you're in a coma the rest of your life, anything short of that, you still have power to overcome to some degree. And most of the time you have power to not only completely, not all the time, but most of the time you have power to completely overcome what was thrown your way and become stronger as a result. And that's the entire problem with the woke agenda is, oh, I'm a victim and now I'm helpless. And that's victim mindset. And it's total bullshit. And it's just people taking the easy way out without having the courage to face their demons. A lot of people don't know how to face their demons. Hey, that's where we come in. If you don't know how to do something, start researching, find out. The answers are out there. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've actually never studied the Alcoholics Anonymous steps. She starts going through, like, you write out the things that people bothered you. I'm like, that's very similar to a certain practice we do in hypnosis called Gestalt.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and almost everyone, I won't say everyone, but almost everyone with victim mindset, something bad did happen to them.
yeah.
And we should honor that. You know, all of our emotions have a reason for them, behind them.
Yeah.
And so we honor all of that. But then the lie is, oh, because it happened, I'm stuck here. It's like, okay, the trauma is real, but you don't need to keep it. You can't overcome. Anyone who doesn't empower you, if they don't empower you, don't listen to them, because they're full of shit.
Yeah. But I agree. And when it's interesting, because really what the kind of hypnosis you and I perform,
Yeah,
we are kind of expediting that 12-step process in a way.
Yeah, we do it in one day.
Right. And because a lot of the CBT correctly identifies, because that's kind of what they're doing in Alcoholics Anonymous, is, talking about it cognitively, trying to get out this anger and resentment cognitively, writing it down.
Well, CBT doesn't really even go into trauma. CBT focuses on behavior.
Well, okay, I should be more.
So they do kind of have you acknowledge, they have you do a life inventory and, acknowledge your trauma. CBT. Now, I'm not saying no psychotherapist acknowledges your trauma. Some do, but CBT practice is behavioral therapy. They focus on the behaviors. What's that?
What would you call AA then? What kind of therapy would you give that a name?
It's a 12-step group. It's its own thing.
There's not a.
It's not a lot of psychologists have their addicts go to 12-step groups, but it's never been a scientific practice. In fact, there's a lot of religiosity at the non-denominational religiosity at the core of the 12 steps, which to some degree actually kind of I don't think the 12 steps are a perfect program from what I've seen, but they are more help. They do in general, they do a lot more good than harm. It's more a net positive for sure.
I think
it's not perfect in it. And it wasn't formed scientifically. It was formed by this guy, I think Bill. By the way, Bill was he was sober, but man, he still wanted to drink like crazy. And he was also a womanizer, and he stopped drinking alcohol, but he really wanted to drink alcohol. On his deathbed, he was begging for a drink before he died, and they wouldn't give it to him. And he was like a womanizer. And so he was maybe a sex addict. He had other addictive practices. So the 12-step program it can somewhat fix toxic shame, but it is an imperfect program for sure, which is...
Yeah. Bill Wilson. I just asked Grok real quick.
And there is a question here. Let's put this up. But I think 12-step programs definitely do more good than harm.
Well, my point with real quick before we get into this comment, my point with that was that they're using maybe not CBT proper, but they're trying to use a cognitive tool to address a subconscious issue. And so if those Alcoholics Anonymous people had hypnosis at their disposal, perhaps a lot of the same steps would be a lot more effective if they just went under trance to do it. So, anyway.
So,
Debbie? You want to read it off?
Yeah. So Zebby asks, how do you recommend to change one's identity towards who they want to be or characteristics they would like to embody? And that is an excellent time to go ahead and show you our free self-hypnosis program, which does absolutely that. And it is in our free community. Oh, are you able to queue it up? Because it's trying to make me log into school.
Yep, I got it.
Okay. And so if you see the banner at the bottom, it's talking about 2 programs. I have a program for helping people overcome anxiety approaching women, dating anxiety. but also join our free community, school.com/RyanFowlerSOS-7231. It's free to join. Reach out to our community, find support there. But then the classroom, upper left, if you could click that, Jordan.
Yeah.
There is a free self-hypnosis course right there. So there's an ebook that explains how your subconscious mind works, why it keeps you stuck. It's all free. It's a 1 hour read. And then there are training videos. And the most important one is how to do self-hypnosis. And then you fill out the worksheets. Critically important to do the worksheets and then listen to the audio. That one right there teaches you how to use our basic self-hypnosis program. And there's even an audio there. So you watch the training video, you fill out the worksheets to help you connect to your trauma, toxic shame, or other trauma. And then there is a self-hypnosis audio where training video shows you how to use it, and you go in, and it's all core identity we're working on. Toxic shame is I'm not good enough in some way. It's I'm not good enough, I don't belong or fit in, or I cannot get what I want. For whatever reason. You might have one of those, you may have all three. This is all about finding these false core beliefs in your subconscious, false identity beliefs. That's what toxic shame is. And the process literally gets that out of you, and it replaces that with unconditional love and unconditional belief in your inherent value and ability. The more we do anything, the better we get at it until we get enough skill to get what we want. I'm good enough just for who I am. I have massive value just for who I am. I don't need to do or say anything to have that value. I just have it. We put that in your core after we get the trauma out. And so this is a basic course. About 80% of people, it's really going to help them. The other 20% have complicated inner issues. Maybe they don't know how to connect to their emotions. Maybe their inner issues are too complex for them to figure out. Book a one-on-one session. Honestly, though, everyone really should book a one-on-one session because we teach you how to do self-hypnosis better, and we do a lot of analysis as experts, and we look at your self-talk and several other things the basic program doesn't do. And you're going to see an expert doing a session for you so you see how it's done at the highest level. So I think everyone should everyone has some toxic shame. No one had a perfect childhood. And so everyone has some things in their subconscious to improve on. Even people with relatively confident people had great childhoods, still have some things in their subconscious not perfect. We find it, we fix it, you're doing better. If you can't afford a one-on-one session, don't hesitate. Still use the self-hypnosis program. I had people tell me they had 10 out of 10 depression, and they listened to the audio 4 or 5 times, cured their depression. I've seen people, one girl, again, I'm not making any claims for you or anyone in particular that this will work in a similar way. I'm just telling you real life experiences. One girl was an anorexic. She listened to the audio. It cured her anorexia. And she had rape trauma, and it cured her rape trauma. Just the free shit. It was crazy. Now, again, I'm not making any claims or guarantees it'll do that for you, but it did happen for her. I've had people, big anxiety, fix their anxiety, fix their procrastination for free. Now, a lot of people, at some point, you're going to find some stuff you can't fix on your own, and you'll want to do a session with us. But by all means, use the free stuff, improve your life. So that's the approach you want to take, Zebby. And yeah, absolutely. So when does listening multiple times help more? Yes, Zebby. And I found self-hypnosis 12 years ago, and within 2 months, I listened to 40 audios, 40 times. So what that did is I used to have very bad manic depression. I used to have CPTSD, complex PTSD. I had general anxiety disorder, and I had a lot of trapped rage and resentment because I was abused as a child, emotionally abused. I wasn't physically abused. It was psychological abuse. So that's why I had manic depression, all that other stuff. Now, I went to therapy, on normal therapy, conventional therapy, prior to self-hypnosis for 15 years, on and off, about 100 sessions. Fixed about 60% of my depression, didn't fix anything else. So I did this, and within 2 months, listening to the audio 40 times, really probably less than 2 months, but somewhere around there, cured all my depression. The last few years of therapy could not get the 40% of my depression still there. Fix that all, fix all my anger, rage, resentment, feelings of worthlessness, all gone. Felt I had massive value, absolutely changed my life. And within 3 years, my income went up 2.5 times. But I just was way happier, way more confident. And the program I used did not teach me how to use it to fix anxiety, but I later learned how to use it to fix anxiety. And then I fixed all my anxiety, and that took a month or two. I did eventually need, I hired a couple hypnotists to, they were good. They were not as effective as me, but they were able to fix some stuff I couldn't get on my own with multiple sessions. So yeah, absolutely listening to the audios multiple times. You're not going to fix everything in one listen. You will, the first time I used the audio, it didn't do anything for me because I wasn't using it right. So you got to follow the instructions.
Yes.
Just listening to it will not fix you. You passively listen to it. That won't fix you. You might feel a little better.
Right. All these like binaural beats.
You have to watch the training video. You have to use the worksheets and then use that with the audio, right, because it is an active process to rewire your brain. You listen to the audio and nothing else, and you're passively listening. You might feel a little better temporarily.
You're not rewiring
your brain, just listening to the audio.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything such as like passively clearing your trauma, like this binaural beat stuff? I think
I've tried it. It didn't work for me.
Yeah, I think that's mostly a scam. I don't know.
If you do it a lot, it can slowly rewire your brain. So I go to the video.
What do you mean? Define a lot.
Watch my Super Neuroplasticity, the 4-part series.
Uh-huh.
I go into the science. Dr. Andrew Huberman, Stanford neuroscientist, he has a lecture on how to rewire your brain, like massive rewiring, like that, like big deep change. The science has been done on it. Mainstream psychologists don't use it, probably because they don't want to fix people right away. You know, they look at their patients as an annuity. Cool. This guy's going to be with me for years. I'm going to have an income stream for years, you know, if the guy sticks with it, because they get you better very slowly. Their best treatments only work for half the people. Our treatments work for more than the 90%.
Right.
So, I mean, it's crazy.
Right. And yeah, I would say for the audios, you can listen to it multiple times. And I would caution you, if you feel like you're getting discouraged, because if you feel like you're not getting anywhere, then either come talk to one of us about it, because you're likely not connecting with the belief when you're using the audios. Like Ryan said,
20% of people won't figure it out on their own.
Right. This is not a passive process. This is a very active process. I mean, so much so that you don't even, like, I don't even use audios when I clear it on stuff on my own.
You clear your own trauma without the audio.
It's you. You are doing self. There's this phrase.
You're fixing yourself. The audio is a guide.
Right. There's this phrase, and there's this phrase that when we were first learning hypnosis, that they like to say, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. That we are really just guides to show you how to hypnotize yourself. We can't hypnotize somebody that's not a willing participant. And so
we don't fix anyone. We guide you to fix yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're struggling with that, if you're using these audios, like I keep trying to clear this one thing and it's not working, come talk to us. I've helped out guys who have filled, especially, and it helps if you filled out the worksheet prior to. So if you fill out the worksheet, you do the audios and you're like, still not getting it, come show us what you've worked on, because then we have a place to start. It's a lot easier for us to help you if you've actually done some of the work initially. So you've at least thought about some of these things, tried to identify these limiting beliefs, and then we can parse through, you know, your writing, your work, and go, okay, a lot of these, you know, we can say, okay, this thought is useful, this isn't as useful. We can parse through. We're very good at quickly identifying through your writing what the subconscious belief is. And so I think that's actually a lot of the value we can add, because I've been thinking about how to market our brands recently, Ryan, is it's not just the hypnosis part. It's the other thing we need to, I think we should maybe talk about more, is the fact that we're very good at identifying what the beliefs are. Because
that's
think the
step
hypnosis
one.
is actually the simpler part. But the identifying
I
for
agree.
most people takes a lot more, well, maybe not a lot more work, but that is where our experience and our intuition can really help clients, is identifying what's wrong. Because it's really the same, 5 or 6 tools we use in hypnosis every time. Those really don't change too much, but it's the identifying that's the real. If you identify it, we can.
What requires the most skill, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now there are some times in hypnosis, people have resistance to sending certain dysfunctional, painful subconscious programs away. And so can be a fair amount of skill, but like 85% of the time, it just goes away. You don't even need to do that. Now, I will let you know, if you go into the more info, all the text right below the video, and expand that, there's a link to do a free 30-minute consultation with me. We do it over Zoom. Do you have anything like that, Jordan? I should put that in the banner from going here on out.
But I can add it. I can put it in the chat if you like. I use
go ahead and put it in the chat, and in the description there's a link to book a free 30-minute one-on-one consult with me over Zoom. We'll answer any questions you have. If you're like, oh, I did the self-hypnosis, I'm stuck here, I'll give you advice on how to get unstuck. And you could free 30-minute consult with me, no problem. So Zebby then just put, you also need to listen multiple times, because you have multiple bad subconscious programs in you. And the more you do this, the more you become aware of what is in you that makes you struggle. Could you say why some people don't have any long-term chances with hypnosis and others do? Yeah, so in my experience, I help more than 90% out. All right, I'm able to help. My guess is 93, 95%. It's definitely way more than 90. It's more than 90% for sure. It's more than 9 out of 10. I'm able to help. What I've noticed, and I'd like you to chime in your experience, Jordan, if there's anything different. I've noticed that people I can't help, they're either very emotionally shut down and they can't access their emotions, or they can only access them a tiny bit. And that's a defense mechanism. They've had so much trauma. They just shut down. They just disassociate. They've shut it down. So, and that way they won't feel pain, but then they don't really feel anything. And that's only a small percentage of people. A lot of people are partially shut down. They partially suppress their emotions. A lot of those people we can help. But if you're like totally shut down, people like that tend to be very apathetic, or they're extremely analytical or robotic. Again, it's a small percentage of people like that. So those people can be very difficult to help. Also, people with rigid mindsets. They're very black and white thinking. Some religious people are like this. Not all. In fact, most religious people are not like this. But some people come to me, and a subconscious program is belief tied to a feeling, 2 parts. If you don't want to get rid of the belief that is causing you the painful feeling, then you're not going to get better. And some people have such rigid beliefs. They're like, no, it has to be this way. I'm not going to change this. All right, fine. You're going to keep struggling. You're going to keep suffering, because the pain you feel that makes you struggle or makes you have coping mechanisms to avoid the pain, I can't get rid of it if you're not willing to get rid of the belief that is tied to it. You got to get rid of them both. But again, very small percentage, maybe 5 to 7% of people are in one of those 2 camps where they're very difficult or even impossible to help.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we should compare notes on this.
Half of those people over time can overcome that if they stick with it. So it's maybe more like 2% we can't help.
Yes. I've often thought about, like, because it's often their own limiting beliefs, the avoidance of shame, which prevents them from even booking a session or doing the self-hypnosis, the free material on their own. I mean, you had one guy, you got a testimonial from that's like, I procrastinated doing the self-hypnosis audios for months.
Yeah.
But
6 months or
eventually,
so.
and so it seems to be, the best I can figure is like a case-by-case basis about people who it just happens to be what hurts more or what is more desirable. There's got to be some threshold you cross where it's like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel this anymore. It's going to be painful temporarily, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know I'm going to feel better. And so everybody's tolerance for what they'll put up with is different. And it's not, you can't always predict it. It's some people like, and it's not always just because you were more traumatized, you're more unwilling to let stuff go. Some people, they're like, I know I was really traumatized. I had all this stuff happen to me and I want to let this go. Just give me the tools, and they drop it.
And then they do
some
it.
People are the other way where they didn't have as much trauma and they still don't want to let that stuff go. So it's not even about how, like, it doesn't really help to compare yourself to others in that way. It's kind of all relative. There are people
some people aren't ready yet. And sometimes just continuing to suffer for a while, and you finally get to the point, I'm sick and tired of this, and then you're ready. But almost everyone who comes to us is ready.
So the difference is, if you think you deserve to suffer, then sometimes you never break out of that loop. There needs to be some part of you, even if it's small, I think, that believes even if you deserve to suffer, that you also don't. And so, because there are plenty of people who are like, I don't deserve to feel better. So like they trap themselves. But there needs, because I think, Ryan, you said like you didn't feel like you were good enough, but I still think there was some tiny part of you that was like, I'm sick of this crap.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this anymore. And some part of you that felt like you deserved to get out of it. Yeah. Even if 99%
or I just wanted to. I was in so much pain when I was at my worst. It's like I got to do something. And I will also say people with a very strong high level of narcissistic personality disorder, that is all crafted around I cannot face within me. So I have all these defense mechanisms to never face what's in me. And they're people with full-blown NPD are highly anxious, highly insecure, generally pretty miserable, but deep down. And they deal with it by running away from that as much as they can and not facing it. So that type of person will just never do a session with us. Same thing with the sociopath. The sociopath has shut down partially or completely all of their emotions except for anger. This is why they're bored, because they don't feel much except for anger. And then they engage in all these high-risk activities. But they have this same thing with psychopaths. They have this level of arrogance that they don't need therapy. And so they'll never even come to us. And that's you're probably looking at about 10% of the population have some sort of major personality disorder or close to it. Some of them we are willing to be helped and can be helped. Like borderline may resist coming for a while, but eventually some of them seek therapy and can get better. It just kind of depends. But like narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, the really hardcore ones will never even submit to treatment.
And I'll say some narcissists even, there's a...
If you have narcissistic traits, I've still helped people like that. They're just not full-blown narcissists.
I've done, in my research, I've observed that some therapists have seen that narcissists who actually do end up going to therapy are really just, I think, what was the phrase you used there? It's an empty gesture, or
sometimes they'll go to
what's the word
listen,
you used?
Some people go to therapy to manipulate others. They're like, I'm going to therapy, why don't you? But they don't go to therapy to ever fix their trauma. Like, this is actually
right.
A lot of women will go to marriage counseling with their husbands, and they don't intend to fix the marriage. They just want to say, yeah, we went to counseling, it doesn't work. So then they feel justified divorcing the guy. But they always plan on divorcing the guy. They just wanted to make it appear Like, well, I tried,
Yeah.
you know, but it's
Form of
bullshit.
manipulation,
And some people do
essentially.
that with therapy. They want to feel like they did everything, but they really don't want to get better.
Well, there's that, and there's also the therapist described when some narcissists go to therapy is that the narcissist is not really there to heal. They are there to tell the therapist what they want to hear so that they give the appearance of healing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very, they're not actually willing, because they're never actually willing to be vulnerable, but they figured out how to pretend to be that way.
Exactly.
And that's why narcissists, I think, can be tricky to understand sometimes, is because some of their actions that they take, there's a term, LARPing, like live action role playing. They have figured out how to emulate the characteristics of a healthy person without actually being a healthy person, which I think leads to people like, if you have, that's why I think narcissists sometimes, they have people in their lives that don't see that there's something wrong with them because they're so good at creating this illusion because they practiced it. And if you're not watching if you don't have a trained eye, it's very or if you're emotionally invested in this person, if they're a parent or a sibling or something like that, you might miss those traits that someone like
you
Ryan
miss the red flags, although the red flags are there. You know, usually before too long, you see cracks in the mask of the narcissist if you know what to look for.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. You'll notice chinks in the armor. You'll notice pattern interrupts. Absolutely. Do you want to keep going? We're over an hour. I don't know how much time you got for the webinar here.
Let's see. Where are we at the I think there's a little more good stuff to watch.
How much time do you got left?
Yeah, you know, I have a webinar in 20 minutes, so we do need to wrap it up. So I just put in the chat. So there's Jordan's link. Zoom with Jordan or I. But it's also in the information. Jordan, give me that link and I'll put it in the description from now on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, happy to answer you guys' questions anytime. We're here for you guys. Victim mentality sucks. People do it. It's just another coping mechanism for toxic shame. Some people become alcoholics to not face their shame. Some people become codependents and they're trying to get validation from other people so that they feel good enough. Some people go victim mentality. Hey, if I'm powerless, then I'm not at fault, and hide their shame that way. It's all just coping mechanisms. Get rid of that toxic shame, man, and claim your power. You don't need to be bad things happen to good people. No one's disputing that. We certainly don't dispute that. You know, if you've had trauma, you know, acknowledge that. You know, it's usually people who struggle. The core root of your struggle is probably not your fault. It almost never is. But just because these bad things happened, the lie is you can't overcome. Like 99% of the time, you absolutely can. And overcoming involves taking responsibility. Maybe it's not your fault that you were abused or whatever that made you a victim, but you have the power to overcome that victimhood, and no one will do it but you. No one can do it but you. It is your responsibility. And so whether that's fair or not, the truth is you can overcome and then have a good life, or stay a victim and the rest of your life sucks. And that would be very unfortunate, because the truth is we can overcome and have great lives. We can claim our power. We do have more power than we know to lead great lives. And none of us need stay in victim mentality. That's our show. You have more power than you know. Thanks everyone for watching.